everybody, Richard here again. Welcome back to my mini-series on UI Builder. Today we're going to be looking at the My Notes app again. So this is episode number 3. And in this one, this is going to be a slightly longer episode. We're going to be looking at a few elements. We're going to be creating a new tab on one of our forms. We're going to be looking at the auditing of our note table, because what we want to do in this particular episode is we're going to put a control on a form that shows us how our note has changed over time. So to do that, we're going to have to do a number of different things. So before we get started, what we need to do is we need to go and check to see if our note table has been, is audited basically. And then to do that, what we have to do is we have to go to the system. So you'll need to be in your system as a system administrator or somebody with the suitable privileges. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into System Definitions and Dictionary. And in there, we're then going to search for our table. So our table, the SNC My Note app notes, note table, sorry. So we'll do that. And then what we're going to do is we look for the very first item on here, which is the collection one. So if we go into that, what we have to do is to make sure this audit item here is ticked. If this is not ticked, tick this, and this will now make your table auditable, which means it's just going to capture the changes to the various fields that we have as we go along in here. So once you've done that, you can go and check to see if it is audited by making some changes to the data and going to the sys_audit table. So if you do the sys_, so if you go to all and type, sys_audit.list. Now be careful doing this on a system that's been used for a while, because this will list out everything in your audit table and it can take a few moments to come back. If you do that, just be patient with it. But what you will want to do then is make sure you've set the table name to be the table that you wish to look for in the audit. So just be careful of that so that you don't, because it will take a little while to come back. So just be aware of that. Right, so once we've done that, we've ticked that, we've hit update, and that's done that on our table. What we're going to do now is we're going to go back to Studio and we're going to start to make some changes to our app. So the things I'm going to be running through here, we're going to go back into UI Builder, obviously, because that's what we're doing with here. So I've already opened that up here. So, go through Workspace, then UI Builder. Now when we're in UI Builder, we're now going to look and go back to our records page and our notes record page, because we're going to put this on the actual note record itself. So you remember from last time, we have to go and specify the table and the record. So I've got my note here with our drop down that we did in our last episode. But what we want to do now is we're going to add another tab to this section here. And what we're going to do that, first of all, so we look through our body, we've got the container at the top, and then we have our main tab here. And you'll notice over on the right hand side here, we have a tab and related lists. Now, because we don't have any related lists to this particular table at the moment, that's hidden. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a new tab. And we're going to just start with an empty container on this tab. So, click next. And what we're going to call this, our note changes. Yeah, you can call it whatever you like. I'm just going to call it note changes. We could put an icon in it. I'm going to put a lovely little, I call it the heartbeat icon, but we'll put that one on there. And we'll create that. So as you see, we've got a new tab. Now I want that to be before the related list. So we go over to the right hand side here, pick that up and move that. So now that'll have the details and the note changes. So that's created me a new tab. So to make this work, we need to start doing some things with it. So we're going to need to build out a form. So we can do that. So we've got our layout items here. So we could have our 2-column. We're just going to be using a single column one, but we're going to be using the containers that we've been using previously to build out this particular layout. So what we want to do, I'm going to add in I want a container for the top. So we want a container. So I put that one in, and then I want to add another container after that one. So I'm going to put in another container. There we go. Now it's showing them side by side, and that's just simply because if we come down to what we've got here, we've got our note, and the reason it's showing them side by side is just simply because if you will, the page has been set up to show them going across. Now we can change the direction to go down, and now we see the two containers are sat. Oh, that didn't work, but okay. I accidentally clicked something, didn't mean to do that. So now we have our container 1 and container 2 showing up here. What I'm going to have in container 1, which is going to be the top section of our tab here, is a drop down to show the dates of the changes that have occurred. So what we're going to do here, we want to add a component into here. We're going to add a drop down. So like before, so we want to drop down. Let's go with that drop down. There we go. And like we did before, I don't want any of the pre-built configurations, so we're going to click none. Then I also want to add after that. Now, I could have a button that when somebody picks the dates that we want, they then hit the button, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to have the drop down, but I don't want it to span the entire top part, because I don't particularly like that. So if we set this to be, we want to be over on the left hand side. So you see what I did there? I've said don't grow. Well, I suppose I could set it to grow, because as I put some text in, I do want the dialog, the drop down to change size, but I want it to be left hand orientated. Now I could say I want it over on the right hand side, but for this one I'm just going to put it on the left. That's that done. I'm just going to save where I've got to. I do like to hit save every now and again. And what we're going to put in the bottom section here, I'm going to add a component. Now we've got lots of components here we could use. Oh, there we go. It's the comparator. So we're going to add that in here. Now it's got some default text in, as we can see here by default, and there's the data that we're going to use. Now what we're going to be doing here is we're going to manually put in the data for this. So as somebody picks in the drop down what date they want to compare it against, we're going to collect that data and then put that here on the side. We're going to fill in this particular item, but we can leave that in here for now. So if I just click somewhere else, you know, we can do a little bit of work to make this look a little bit tidier. So for example, if we go into styles, I want to add a little bit of spacing around it. So let's put in a margin. Say we want a medium margin. So let's put a little bit of a border around it. And I want to do the same for the drop down. Let's put in a margin. Let's put a medium one on that one. Let's save that. So if I just quickly preview this. So we've got our note changes and we've got our drop down. Looking good so far. Excellent, let's close that. So that was step one. So we've made sure our table is auditable. We've now built our form with our two controls on. Now we need to put in some code to collect the data to be stored on this form. But then we also want to then show how when somebody clicks that drop down, it's then gonna show that. Right, so first step, we need to populate this drop down with some dates. Now, I've put a little bit of data in already in the sys audit table. I've made one change to my note field. First things first, let's go back to here. Which particular note was I using? Let's just go and double check that. Let's have a look in our details. So it was note 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my notes table, preview it. Let's find, I think it was this one. Yeah, note 1. So my first note with some changes, update that, some more, so change some changes, and then a little more. So I've made 2 updates to this note. If I now come back to my sys audit, and let me just rerun my audit view. Yeah, I put in the additional filter for the sys to try and speed it up a bit. So what you'll notice in the audit table, in the sys audit table, is I've got the changes that have occurred for my particular note, and I've got a timestamp of when that happened. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage the created field here to populate that drop down. So what we're going to do is we go back to our pen UI Builder. So the first thing we're going to need, we need a data source. So remember from episode 1 where I walked through the various different elements that were of here, we have the data field, so this data item. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a new data source. Now, quite a lot get listed here when they appear. But what we're going to do, we need to go down to global. Where is it? Global. And you'll notice under global there's quite a few, but there's one here that we want, which is lookup records. So lookup records, and we're going to we'll just hit add. Now by default you get something went wrong because we haven't actually specified a table yet. So what we're going to do, we're going to put the sys audit table. So we'll pick sys audit, but we need to put some conditions in, otherwise we're just going to get lots and lots of data. So we edit conditions. So we want to put in our table name. So the table name, remember, is a parameter that we're passing as part of this form. So what we can do, we can go at, let's just do that correctly, sometimes it doesn't always work, at context dot props dot, and then we should have, these forms don't render terribly well, but we should have table. And then we want to put an and condition in here because we want to filter down just for our particular record, which in the audit table, if we go back to the audit table, is the document key. So this is the sys that we're going to be using here. So let's come back to here. So we're then going to go say document key is, now remember, we can get this to work. We come back here, put this back to that one, and do it from the bottom up. It seems a bit, so context. See, it can be a little frustrating. At context dot props dot, and then we should have the sys. So that's our record that we're dealing with. And if we come back here, go back and put this one in, and then we say at context dot props dot table. Please in the comments if anybody's got a better way of doing this on this particular form. So I'm going to hit apply. Now what we're going to get back is just a bunch of sys, but you'll notice we're getting, I think it's 4 records because that's the number we've got in the audit table. But now we need to specify the fields that we want to bring back. So what I'm actually going to bring back is I'm going to bring back 2 values. I want to bring back the created, so we can add that one in, which is now giving us our dates. Maybe worth us bringing back who did the update, so we can say created by. So that's giving us the name of the person, and then we can also bring back the value. So if we go back to our sys audit table, you'll see we have old value, which is the value that was there before, and then the new value. So we're going to be comparing in our drop down. We could go from the old to the new, so we could show the 2 side by side, so you can see it changed from this to this, this to this, this and this. Or we could do it, say we just bring back the new value and compare what we've got versus the new value. But we're going to bring back the old and the new value so we can look at the changes that have gone on over the time. So if we come back to Studio, so we want to bring back new value, and we want to bring back, so let's add old value. So as you can see here, we've got the data that's come back. So we've got our row data, sys, created on, created by, new value, old value, and so on and so on. So that's our data set. Right, so we've got our data source, we've got it created, we've got it set to open as soon as we open the record. If we wanted to do it so it didn't load at the very beginning, but we have a button, we want it to be somebody presses a button to refresh it. So for example, if we want the drop down, somebody to pick the value and then it to go off and get the values, we could do it that way, in which case you use the only when invoked. But we're going to use it as immediate, which means it loads as soon as the form loads. So I'm just going to hit save. Now that's great. So our form's going to load, it's going to get the data, but we're not doing anything with it at the moment. So remember in our last one, we created a client script where we went and collected the data when something happened. What we're going to do this time is we're going to create a client script that collects the data from the data source, and we're going to use it to populate that drop down that we've got. So I'm just going to close that for a sec. I'm going to go and give the drop down a slightly better name. So let's go back to our tab. Rather than calling it drop down 2, I'm going to give it a different name. So I want to call it compare date drop down. Actually, that's quite a long name, really. So yeah. So compare date drop down. Now, what we're going to do to make this work is we come back to our parameters. We're going to create a new client state, which is then going to form the values that are going to appear in that drop down. Now, if we can remember from the drop down, it went basically ID value, ID value. But to save ourselves a bit of time and make it a lot easier, what we're going to do is we go back to that drop down. So we just close this for a sec. We've got our drop down selected, go to config, we look at the data, let's grab the JSON, just going to copy that. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new client state parameter, and we're going to call this, we're going to call it drop down. Oh no, let's call it drop down. Let's call it compare dates. Now this is going to be JSON. There we go. You can see that. We can now edit that. Again, like before, we go into that format. Let's paste that in. The only reason I'm keeping this is just makes it easier for me to remember what the structure was that we wanted. Right, so now that's our data for this particular parameter. What we're going to do is we're now going to associate that drop down with this data, just so that I don't forget to do it later. So let's close that drop down. We're going to bind to data, and we're going to say at state dot, and we've got our compare date. That now drop down will be based on whatever goes into that state parameter that we put here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a client script that's going to put the data into that parameter, state parameter. So go to client scripts, let's create a new client script, and let's call this populate compare dates. Right, there we go. Right, okay, so now we're going to build our JavaScript to populate our dropdown. And remember from what we saw before, we need an ID and a label. Now the ID, if we go back to our data set that we have, so we go to our data, we really want that to be the sysid, because that's unique for each record. So we're going to use the sysid.value as part of the ID, and we'll then use that to find the relevant record, and we're then going to display the created date and possibly the name of the person who then created it alongside. Okay, so let's go back to our JavaScript. So the first thing we're going to need to do, we're going to need an array. So we're going to var my array. And now we need to loop through the data set that we created. So it would be api.data.auditData.results. Then we do a for each on that. Helps if I can spell each. Item. And And we're going to iterate through these items. So first things first, we need a constant my item equals. Now remember, we need ID, and that's going to be item dot what was it? It was the sysid field, wasn't it? So if we just go back and have a quick look, it will be item and then the field name. So I think it was sysid, wasn't it? Data. Yeah, sysid. I don't need to copy it, but I'm just going to do that. Now, for the sysid, we also then need the value, because remember, if you look at the data structure that's here, although we've got sysid, we've got two items below it, so we want the value field for that. So that's the ID done. And now on the drop down itself, we want to show, so that's the label, and we want to put into the label, we're going to put the item dot. Now we could put, let's put the user first, so let's say user dot display value. So again, if we go back to our data, so it'll be what is it, user? No, it's sys created by. There we go. So we want sys created by, and we can just double check our audit table. Is that the best one? Oh no, we want user. So we picked the wrong field, didn't we? We didn't want the sys created by, we want the user field. So let's go back to our thing and let's change the, let's add that. We want to add the user to this. Let's add that. So let's add user. So we now get user. That's much better. So we want user value, or display value, because remember, value is the name field, whereas display value is what you're going to see on screen. So we really want the display value. So let's go back to our script. So we want user. So now we've got user, display value, but we also want to put in the date as well, because you know, might put in more than one thing. So we're going to add item dot sys created on dot display value, and again we're using display value because that's going to render it in the date format that the person who's logged in as will see the data item. So let's just go and double check that. So we want sys created on display value. So sys created on display value, sys created on display value. Great. So we colon at the end of that. Now we need to push that onto our array. So we're going to say my array dot push, and it's going to be called my item. So that's pushed that onto there. And then once we've finished that, we want to then remember before API set state and the name of the field that we want, and then the value, which is going to be my array. Now I've forgotten what I called my client state parameter. It was compare dates, that was it. So put it in here. Now if we take this out full screen, let's save that. Now we've created the script, but the script's not going to do execute at all at the moment. So if we go back to our data, now remember we've got the events. We want an event. We want to add an event mapping. So once the data has been fetched properly, we can say that. We click that and we say populate compare dates. Add that. Save that. Now what should happen is if we preview this, yeah, don't show this message again, got it. We go to our notes changed. There we go. So we've got who the person was and when they changed it. So at the moment that doesn't do anything, but you know, it's a great start. So we've collected the data, we've built a script, we've populated our drop down. So the next step that we need to do for this is we now need to, when somebody picks that drop down, they're then going to then have that populate this particular items that we see here on that form. So I'm going to put that in my next episode, so that'll be episode 4. So please come back for episode 4, where you'll see me built the script to pick the drop down, run through the data set, and then populate that on screen. Hopefully see you soon. Thanks.